This has clearly done some damage to what was an effort that began in November between President Biden and the Chinese leader Xi Jinping when they met face to face at the G20 summit in Bali to try to basically put a stop to the downward spiraling relations between the world's two largest economies. We'll just have to see whether there can be any efforts to revive diplomacy in the wake of this, I would argue, a growing crisis.
And happy Sunday, and welcome to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Sunday, February 6, 2023, and we're not here on Saturday because Val Atkinson was coaching the Duke Blue Devils. That's the only way they won. I told Val before we came on that I saw the little earpiece in Coach Shire's ear. He was actually coaching the Duke Blue Devils from his home in Holly Springs, North Carolina, and that's the only way they beat the Tar Heels. But on a serious note, Val, welcome back to The Deal.
Absolutely, Ed. I'll tell you what, they better be glad I wasn't coaching because I don't know if we would have gotten a W or not.
Well, let's not talk about that because that's bad news. In the opening, Val, we saw the shooting down of Chinese spy balloon. I want to deal with this real quick because the major topic I want to talk about today is voting and voting rights, because there's a case that's going to go back to the North Carolina Supreme Court called Moore v. Harper that we've talked about here before. But I want you to really talk in depth about it today because, again, the one thing about The Deal is that we try to educate people here and we try to talk history. So I want you to talk about that. But let's talk about this Chinese spy balloon. You saw the picture of the balloon being shot down just outside between Myrtle Beach and Wilmington, North Carolina. They had to close the airport in both Wilmington and Myrtle Beach. And then they went ahead and shot down the balloon. Now, of course, the Republicans have made a lot of hay out of it, Val. They're saying that Biden should have had it shot down, and not let it go over the country. So let me ask you this. We have balloons up. We have spy satellites up. The Chinese obviously do. They have balloons up. I can go to Google Earth right now and find any U.S. military base or any Chinese military base for that matter. What do you think this whole balloon thing was about? And, what do you make of it first?
Well, first out of the chute, Ed, let me say that I personally believe that it was a weather balloon, as China has indicated. And the reason I believe that is because they came out of the chute so soon to say they apologize, it should not have happened, and that it was a weather balloon to garner data that they needed for their weather services, and they'll try to make sure it doesn't happen again. They came right out of the gate with that. That's not normal for Chinese. They normally deny it to the last second. They accuse us of using it as propaganda. They'll do 1,000 things, but they'll never admit the truth. That's the reason I think that was the case. Now, getting back to the United States and the rest of the world, for that matter, everybody does it. Everybody uses weather apparatuses and a lot of other things. We all have spies. Right now, there are balloons and other technologies that are crossing borders or getting into airspace over oceans and that kind of thing of people that we don't like very much. That happens all of the time. It's happening as we speak, Ed. And that's why I don't see a lot out of it. I like the word you used at the beginning. You said the Republicans were trying to make hay. And that's exactly what they were trying to do, calling Biden weak, asking him why he hadn't done it earlier. And once we shut it down, it's going to land and come down and disintegrate over water, which is the safest thing to do instead of over land. And I think this is something much to do about nothing. I don't want to be found wrong on this one, because if I am, we got issues here. But I think it's much to do about nothing. And I see it fading in the background real soon.
Yeah, I get that. So Val, here's the other part of this. The Chinese and the United States have a economic relationship. I saw, you know me, I go look at the numbers. $759.4 billion in 2021 was the trade of goods coming in the United States. That's only part of it. That's 17.2% of all Chinese exports came to the United States. There are 200 countries in the world. That makes us number one in getting crap from China. Okay. That's not even counting the companies that actually have their products manufactured in China that we sell in the United States as U.S. product, right? So if you talk about Qualcomm, Micron Technologies, Texas Instruments, Apple, Broadcom, you know I'm in the tech business. And then there's a company called Ingram Micron that nobody knows about. If you ask anybody who Ingram Micron is, nobody could tell you. But guess what? Every iPhone, every Cisco router, every Juniper router, you name the company, usually part of their products came through this Ingram Micron, which is completely tied to Chinese. And here's a bigger one, Val. If you want some bacon or a ham that's at a plant in North Carolina with Smithfield Foods, guess who owns it? The Chinese. If you go see a movie this afternoon at an AMC movie theater, guess who owns it? Chinese. The Chicago Stock Exchange, owned by China. GE is now majority owned by Chinese interests. Lenovo Computers, which is based right here in Research Triangle, North Carolina, now owned by the Chinese. So Val, let's wrap this up. If I'm an American and I'm listening to the Lauren Boeberts and all the other Republicans running around screaming, talking about declaring war on China, where the hell do they think they're going to get their shit from if we have a war? One, and number two, to what end? Who are you going to fight? All your kids got TikTok on their phone. Talk to me about, this economic tie between the United States and China.
I've never heard it explained that way, Ed, and you are absolutely 100% on target on that one. We are tied to the hip with China, economically speaking. If you can imagine Walmart closing down, Walmart gets so much of its wholesale goods to sell retail from China. It's difficult to walk through Walmart and see something that's not made in China. It can't happen. That would have one heck of an impact on our overall economy, especially down at the lower rungs at the retail level. It just can't happen anymore. This whole economic world, and we've been successful at pushing capitalism on everybody, whether they wanted it or not. This whole economic world is joined at the hip with one another. And if you try to take one part out, it affects the whole. You can't do that anymore. So your question is very relevant. What do we do if we go to war with China? Problem, you don't do it. Both sides fail, and neither side prospers. Everybody goes into abject poverty. And we know that. The economists know that. It's not recommended. It's not like 1940, where you can fly over some B-2 bombers, bomb them back into the Stone Age, and have them to beg you for relief, that they will become your new slaves if you just stop bombing them. That's what some stupid right-wingers think, that while we have the advantage, let's go and put pressure on them and have them work for us, have them to be our new slaves. And the economy as we know it now will still work the same. The only difference is the United States of America and the West will call all of the shots, and China would have to call us to get permission to go to the bathroom. And it ain't going to work that way.
No, it's not going to work that way. And it's a lot of blowhards up in D.C. on the Republican side. And unfortunately, they have the majority in the House, which gives us a good place to segue. First, I need to tell you that you're listening to The Deal with Ed Clark and Val Atkinson. You are also watching it, if you're watching it on one of the multiple platforms we're on, where you can watch it: YouTube, Anchor, Spotify, wherever, Facebook. And then if you're subscribing on one of the services as well, please encourage people to subscribe. So Val, that's a good segue into the main topic I want to talk about today, voting. And you go, oh, so how do the Chinese floating a balloon over, United States have anything to do with voting? Well, it has to do with whatever response that we ultimately make. And it also has a lot to do with the politics of any of this stuff, right? So these Republicans that are in DC right now, they got people like Santos in their caucus. They got the Boberts and the Marjorie Taylor Greens and all these other people. But the reason why they can rule from a position of actual being the lesser number, right? Because every way you look at this, there are less people registered as Republicans compared to Democrats or independents. There are less people in polls who say they support the Republican agenda. However, they can win control over stuff like the state house in North Carolina. Since both of us are in North Carolina, let's go there. There's a case called Moore v. Harper, and I know you've talked about it before. It used to be called Harper v. Hall, but now it got renamed Moore v. Harper when Speaker Moore took over. And it seemed like it was settled, right? They delayed, voter ID in North Carolina. They made the districts a little bit better. So it turns out that now the Republicans don't have a way to control all the federal House seats, right? So there's a split now in the delegation. But there's still a majority of Republicans in the House and Senate in North Carolina legislature. As a matter of fact, basically, they can overrule anything the governor, decides he wants to do in terms of veto, and they even want to get rid of that. So let me stop talking. I want you to start talking. Explain to people what Moore v. Harper is, because I want to get into a longer, more nuanced discussion about how voting has been a way to keep Black people under control. Since we're in Black History Month, I do want to talk about that. So first, tell us about Moore v. Harper.
Moore v. Harper, it is a case where the North Carolina legislature, and we're talking about Speaker Moore here, is asking the court to rule that the Supreme Court of the state of North Carolina does not have sway, if you will, over decisions, electoral decisions that are made by the legislature. Now, it's already in the Constitution of the state of North Carolina that the governor doesn't have veto power over this process. And if you take the third leg of this triangle out, the Supreme Court, it would mean that the legislature is the untold, unchecked ruler of everything involving elections and the electoral process in the state of North Carolina, that the Supreme Court would not have the ability or the authority for checks and balances to say, hey, come explain yourself, to say that is unconstitutional based on the Constitution of the state of North Carolina. They couldn't even say that. It could be unconstitutional and nobody could say anything about it. That's what they're asking to be done. And now that they have the power, the constitutional power, because they have the majority in the House, they could be in power forever. Because the court has already ruled in Ruco v. Common Cause that gerrymandering is okay, as long as it's not about race. And they've been doing that forever, okay? So what it means is that the Republican-controlled legislature in North Carolina could continue to choose its voters, as opposed to the voters choosing its representatives like it was intended to be. And that's what they want. If they could do that and make it so that the Supreme Court could never overrule or object to what they're doing, they would be fine, especially as long as the Supreme Court of the United States, SCOTA, remains majority conservative, majority GOP appointed, and carries the 6-3 advantage that they do now. This is a very serious case. Because if we get this done, if they get Moore v. Harper done, voting is going to be questionable.
Yeah.
Very questionable.
Well, Val, that's a good place for us to take a break. And when we come back, what I want you to talk about is some historical context on this. In the break, you're going to see a clip. We're going to be running clips from famous African Americans talking about voting. You're going to see Fannie Lou Hamer in the break when she was at the Democratic Convention in 1968, talking about what they were doing in Mississippi. And again, Val, that's in my lifetime. That's in your lifetime. This is not ancient history. And when it was not clear that we were going to even be able to vote, period. And then from 1968, by the time Ronald Reagan gets in office in 1980, you would have thought that black folks were running everything. And then in the interim, in the next 30 so years, it's been this constant, fight to try to keep our voting rights, and they're doing everything they can to take them away. So everybody stay right there. When we come back, we got a whole bunch more to talk about from the historical perspective. You're watching The Deal.
Mr. Chairman, and to the Credentials Committee, my name is Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, and I live at 626 East Lafayette Street, Roosevelt, Mississippi, Sunflower County, the home of Senator James O. Eastland and Senator Stinnett. If the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America. Is this America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our telephones off of the hook because our lives be threatened daily, because we want to live as decent human beings in America?
And welcome back to our second segment of The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. It's Sunday, February 6th. We were out yesterday. If you missed the first part, Val was coaching the Duke Blue Devils, so we won't go back into that. But on a serious note, we talked about the Chinese spy balloon and America's economic relation to China in the first segment. And then we finished that first segment talking about voting, Val, and Moore v. Harper, a case that's going to show back up in the United States Supreme Court. And then in the break, we saw Fannie Lou Hamer addressing the 1968 convention, where they were trying to seek delegates from the state of Mississippi in their delegation at the convention. In 1968, Val, we know what happened in 68. There were riots. King gets assassinated. The second Kennedy gets assassinated. And you're only 3 years since the Voting Rights Act had been passed in 65. And already white folks were tired of black people. They're like, what else do you want? We took away the poll tax. We took away the literacy test. Now you want me to guarantee you the right to vote? That people are not going to harass you or whatever else they were doing to try to keep black folks from voting. So take me back to 1965, Val. I'm born in 1965. And so again, when I think about that, I'm not that old. So if I'm born in 1965 and the Voting Rights Act was just getting passed then, give me some historical context of what it was like on the ground in 1965 that required us to have a Voting Rights Act. And then all the shenanigans that have been pulled over those 50 some years to try to reverse that almost as soon as it was passed.
Let's go back to the state of Mississippi. We know that in 1964, those three civil rights workers were slain there in Philadelphia, Mississippi, or in Neshoba County. And Ronald Reagan made a note going fast forward that's where he would start his campaign. That was the seat, Neshoba County, Philadelphia, Mississippi, was the seat of issue-oriented backlash that the far right wanted to do, okay? What they've done when the 1964 Civil Rights Act was passed, they came up with something called the White Citizens Council. The White Citizens Council was a group of people who decided that we're not going to have this thing. Just like the people came up with something called the Southern Manifesto right after the Brown v. Board decision was made. We're not going to have any of this. We'll fill up the swimming pools with cement before we integrate it, okay? Having black and brown people and splashing water with white people. Can't have that, okay? So that is the tenor, the tone of the period at that time. Civil Rights Act is passed. The most important thing in the Voting Rights Act is Section 4 and Section 5. Section 4 says if in 1964 you had 50% or less of your people registered to vote, or in 1964, if 50% of those registered did not vote, then you come under the auspices of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And that set the tone for Southern states to say, oh my God. Now, what does this mean? Go to Section 5. It says, we will have something called pre-clearance, meaning that before you can change anything regarding your electoral process, you must send it to Washington. And it must be reviewed by the Justice Department or a 3-judge panel that we set up to see if it's advantageous or disadvantageous to anybody based on their race. So let's do that. And pre-clearance was the order of the day. Fast forward to Shelby v. Holder. That happened in the 21st century. They killed Section 4, meaning Section 5 is no good. So now the whole Voting Rights Act is gone. Why did they want to attack this, Ed, in the first place? Let's go back to 1968. That was the first presidential election after the passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. It was my first time voting. I was in Okinawa, Japan. And what happened then was that we had people voting that had never considered voting before. Right-wingers, GOP, other people of that nature, at this time more Democrats, because the right-wingers were in the Democratic Party at that time. They decided this can't happen. We can't have all of these colored people, as you call us here, voting, indiscriminately voting as they wish. We can't have that. So what are we going to do? They came up with what we call now voter suppression tactics. Let's change where the precincts are. Let's change what time they open and close. And let's do something with gerrymandering. Let's put all of the blacks in this district over here because we can never win it anyway. That means that blacks can't help other whites that surround that district, can't help them to win. That's called packing. And also, let's do a little fracking and separating as well. Let's take a campus like North Carolina A&T State University, and let's draw a line right down the middle and put half of the campus in the fifth district and half the campus in the sixth district. That should cause enough confusion that people on campus don't know where they live. Is it based on where your dorm is? Is it based on where your hometown is? And if you go to the wrong precinct, you won't have time to correct that and go back to the wrong. All of these little tactics came about because they were afraid of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. So they concentrated on things like, well, let's see if we can do gerrymandering in a way that we can get control of the state houses. If we can just get control of the state houses, we can set up laws as we choose, and we should never lose again if we set up these laws correctly. Called Uber gerrymandering. It got out of hand and it's still out of control. going back to your initial question, what Moore v. Harper wanted to do is to let's institutionalize this. Let's make it stay this way forever. That whoever's in power now stays in power and nobody can challenge it. Not the governor with his veto pen, not the Supreme Court with its rulings saying that that is unconstitutional. It's called irreversible, irrevocable legislative authority. That's what they wanted in Moore v. Harper. If they get it, Ed, I dare to say that states like North Carolina, and this is a decision that covers the whole country because it's at the Supreme Court level. All of the states are going to be in trouble. And if it's a Republican-controlled state legislature now, it would stay in Republican hands forever, as long as this law is in effect.
Well, thanks for ruining my day, Val. I hear you. I mean, I think that's the thing that we try to communicate to people all the time, that this isn't trivial. That if you don't vote, right, and then you complain, what option do you have left? You're at the mercy of whoever's in charge. So, just for an example, what happened in Memphis recently with Tyree Nichol? I know all the officers were Black, but part of this is about policing, right? And you can't get a hold of policing a local issue if you're not voting in the people who can make enough change to prevent, these kind of things from happening. We've talked over and over about policing and how it's militarized and whatever, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of that has to do with all the people who are in charge that are running cities are in that right of center position, who believe the police should have this unfettered authority, and things like qualified immunity should not be tampered with. And so you don't ever get to a solution like the George Floyd Justice Act was supposed to deal with policing issues at the federal level, right? And so if you don't have a Congress that can pass that kind of legislation, you think they're going to pass something like that with the Congress we got now? No, they're not. And then we come to the states, Tennessee, North Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama, all those states that were in the Confederacy. Well, they have rigged systems, right? So colored people, because that's what it says on my birth certificate, colored people will not be able to affect that if they're not participating in voting. If you look at the numbers, Val, every election cycle, a lot of times elections turn on a couple hundred votes per precinct. And then, so if they can suppress the vote, but if we suppress it ourselves and don't go because we say it doesn't make any difference, I mean, we're just handing it to them. So here's the dilemma. So you got to come up with a solution. So whatever Val says is what we're going to do in America, colored people in America are going to do. How do you convince people that this is in their interest, that there's something going on here? I've heard you often say, well, you can't just do voter registration drives, because if you do the drive and you still can't vote because they figured out a way to keep you from voting, then it doesn't matter. So what's the other piece to this, Val?
The other piece to this is we need to focus our attention, the gunner on the machine gun, the gunner on the artillery piece. It needs to really focus its turret and change it a little bit to what you're shooting at. Voter registration isn't just about Black people. It should not be. And it needs to be a little bit more about some of those white people who are in these, what the GOP considers safe districts. You have got to get to those people, because if we keep voting, we can have 100% turnout. Everybody who's registered voter in the Black community could turn out. But once you get to the polls, if only got one guy you can vote for, what does that matter? It doesn't matter whether it's 50% turnout or 100% turnout if the lines have been drawn in such a way, but it ain't but one guy you can vote for, and all these other 12, 15 people that are making the rules, you and people who look like you can't vote for them. Something in that has got to change. That's where we need to change our turret and focus on white folks. And we have to find a way, Ed, to find enough white people that they have gerrymandered in to talk to them about, hey, we peeped your whole card. We know what you're doing, and we are exposing you to the rest of the planet. You don't have a free and fair democracy anymore. It's a faux democracy, and we're exposing you, and we're giving you the opportunity to change that. This is not right. Let's change. Because as long as we have gerrymandering, as long as candidates are picking their voters, there's a big question mark behind this thing called democracy.
Yeah, there's a big question mark behind this thing called democracy, Val. But the other thing there's a big question mark behind is this is driven by American capitalism. I mean, let's just be honest with it. We started this talking about the Chinese spy balloon in China and about how much America's economy is tied to China. And so there's always this politic around capitalism that's undergirding all this, because we wouldn't have been slaves if it weren't for American capitalism. Now, I know there was slavery in other places. I'm not that stupid. I mean, we're historians, right? We study history. We know that the world's been full of civilizations that had slaves, but American slavery was odious. It was particularly bad because it was tied to capitalism. The South did not have an industry in plants. They had Negroes picking cotton, and then they would beat you if you didn't pick enough, or tobacco, or sugarcane, or whatever. That's how it worked in the Americas. In South America, Brazil, the second biggest country in this hemisphere, right? Full of black people. They got there because they were cutting sugarcane, right? In Brazil, they didn't have the cotton and tobacco we had. They had sugarcane and some other stuff. But the reality is the Americas has been populated by a politic that is run by taking advantage of people. Let's be honest. So here's the last part before we take a break, Val. Since we're talking about history, in Florida, you can't teach history about colored people because that's a bad thing. But I heard, Val, that sort of the College Board kind of caved in to Ron DeSantis and said, okay, well, we'll take out any mention of Black Lives Matter. We'll take out any mention of certain things that make y'all mad. How are we ever going to get anywhere if we don't talk about the truth about history? I mean, the old saying is that, if you don't study your history, you're doomed to repeat it, whatever, blah, 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 which is true. But Val, I mean, I know we always have a segment that has some historical context. Every time I write a piece, I put in the historical context. But a lot of people believe that history started yesterday, and they can't even get back to 1968. What do we do with our young people? How do we get to them if they can't learn it at school?
Well, they're going to learn it one way or the other. The question is when. Will it be somebody having an epiphany and start doing the right thing, or will it be after Civil War #2, or will it be after Armageddon, or whatever? It's going to happen. We're just trying to make sure it doesn't cause for a lot of bloodletting and destruction and upheavals and those kind of things, trying to make it happen peacefully. And we have some on the other side saying, yeah, it'll happen, but over my dead body. Well, we'll have to see what happens with that. But you're absolutely right. It's all about capitalism, Ed. It's all about making the dollar. When you think about things historically, peoples have moved from one place on this planet to another way back pre-historical times. But it's always been because they were following the animals, or because of agricultural famine or something of that nature, that they moved on. there's been a few times that's been about the business of conquest. And it's unfortunate that that's what this last evolution has been about on planet Earth. It was about conquest. Nobody was invading Europe. There was no Europe-wide famine. The Irish had some issues with their potatoes, but it had nothing to do with moving to North America and taking it over from the Native Americans and making the Africans work it for free. It had nothing to do with that. And the French and the Germans and the English and those people, nothing was pushing them to come to this place with the exception of money and greed. The type of government that they hated, Ed, which was a monarchy, they wanted to establish here. They wanted everybody to be his or her own king or queen. You could do that based on your birthright. If you were born white, at some point, if you did the right things, you could be your own king or queen if you manage capitalism correctly. And we will build a society around you, a culture around you, that just the fact of who you are and what you look like makes you better than those who don't look like you, just by being born that way. And they came up with, and you talk about when, 2,000 years ago is my mark, Ed, they came up with their own culture, language, religion, their own economy, and how that works. All of it is based on militarism. It's been working for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Well, 2,000 years, and people are going to write until we realize where we are on this planet, that 11% of the planet is ruling the other 89%. And the 11% are Caucasians, Ed. Mm-hmm. All Caucasians on the planet make up about 11% of the planet. So when the 89% gets tired of it, then it'll change.
Yeah, tell me about it. Well, Val, that's a good place to take a break. And when we come back, I want to talk about the economy. Vice President Harris was in North Carolina talking about small business. I want to talk about that a little bit. The economic numbers still look good despite everything else. And then finally, I do want to wrap up and just set us up for the rest of Black History Month and some things that you can do to make sure that you're educating your kids and the rest of your family about African American history. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
Too many women die every year due to pregnancy-related complications. 2/3 of these deaths are preventable. As healthcare professionals, we play a critical role in making sure women's health concerns are addressed during and after pregnancy. Help your patients understand the warning signs and when they should seek care. Actively listen when she raises concerns. It could save her life. Hear her.
When the shuttle made it possible for scientists to be a part of the program as astronauts, then that was my break. And I will be involved in payload operations, performing some of the experiments. If there's any extravehicular activity going on, then I will be the one performing that. So it's a multiplicity of duties.
Let's chat with the people of NASA. People like Dr. Ronald McNair, a physics professor and one of NASA's newest astronauts. You are a PhD from MIT, aren't you?
That's right.
Isn't that that's kind of tough thing to get, isn't it?
I have to agree.
Why is it so tough?
Oh, it's a very broad field many times involving the abstract and things which aren't exactly intuitive. They violate our intuition and it violate the world as most people know it often. And you have to bring a lot of different disciplines together with physics. Your electromagnetism, your thermodynamics, a lot of things you must pull together But it's very challenging, but it's, again, one of those challenging efforts that's satisfying. Identify what you want to do and go straight forward and sort of be willing to sacrifice and ignore these forces that try to limit you and divert your efforts.
And welcome back to our third and final segment of The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. We've been chopping it up this morning, talking about a lot of stuff. Talking about history. In the break, you saw a clip there about Ron McNair, who was an astronaut, but he's also a North Carolina A&T connection. And we don't want to make this always be about bad things or negative things or all the hard struggles that African Americans have been through. We've been through a lot of good stuff. And Ron McNair was one of the greats in African American history that you should know about. And Val, I said I wanted to talk a little bit more about African American history and wrap that up, the things that you can do to encourage people to, learn more. We're in the age of the internet. You can Google just about anything. And people spend a whole bunch of time on social media, TikTok and Facebook and, you name it, right? And so the information is available. It's out there. I know you got grandkids, and I do too. And buying books and stuff like that is good, right? Because you're a reader, I'm a reader, we read all the time. Just talk to me real quick, and then we'll move on and talk about the economy. But, have you thought about, how you want to interact with your grandchildren and great-grandchildren ultimately over this whole notion of African-American Black history?
Yes, and it all starts with their parents and what we've done with them. And to make sure that we don't leave them out of the mix here, I'm always in conversation with my son and my daughter who have my grandchildren, asking them, pressuring them, gently nudging them to do those kind of things with their kids that will be lasting, that will start a habitual type of existence of wanting to learn, eager to ingest more knowledge and those kinds of things. You got to push them. And sometimes it's through books, sometimes it's through the media, social media, whatever. Sometimes it's through actual experiences. Let's not forget that. When the last time have you taken your kids or grandkids to a museum or some of the other outlets that are real and you can see and touch and hear and be a part of some of these activities that are going on within the community. So it's a holistic approach that parents have to deal with their kids in a young age, pre-adolescence. You've got to catch them then, Ed, to start training their minds to be inquisitive, to look further, to not accept the first thing they hear or see without challenge. And if we continue to do that, and I think most parents do, sometimes we have to go outside of the box, Ed, and there are some kids that don't have both parents or a parent at home to do this for them. Then that's where we have to step outside the box and become a surrogate parent sometimes to some of these kids, whether it's being in the community, coaching, being a part of some other kind of thing. There's some way that you can touch the lives of some of these kids and encourage them to be inquisitive.
Yeah, exactly. Val, that's the reason why I coached. It's because I never thought that I was going to grab a kid and make them the next Carl Lewis or Emmett Smith or whatever. If that happened, good. But the thing is I knew from the coaches that were around me growing up that they encouraged me to read and learn more and put myself in positions where I was challenged, academically or even just, knowing more about the world. So those are all good ideas, and I encourage folks.
Let me say this, Ed, before you move on.
Yeah.
And I wore this shirt particularly today because it says I'm a coach with the Cary Parks and Rec organization here in Cary, North Carolina. And I coach a group of 13 and 14-year-old kids. Not a single one of them happens to be African American. Not a single one of them happens to be Hispanic. And I did that intentionally because what I want these kids to see is there is an African American male here who can take a position of leadership and be the boss and impart knowledge to you to make you more successful, to give you a path. Here is another example. I'm not the example that you see sometimes and want to make me your RSO that you see at the school, or make me the janitorial guy, or make me the parent coming to pick up a naughty kid. No, I'm your coach. And we're going to do things right, and you're going to learn to live with me, and we're going to do some things and be successful. That's why I took the job.
Well, that's an excellent point too, is actually seeing African-American men and women in a different light, right? Not just as you're not just the zany sidekick in the sitcom, right? or the one that's pimping around in the Starsky and Hutch or whatever, right. Huggy Bear or whatever. You actually make a difference in their life. You teach them a skill, and you help them understand what it is to grow up and become an adult, so on and so forth.
Work with one another.
Work with one another. Awesome. Absolutely. So, Val, before we run out of time, Vice President Harris was in North Carolina. Let's look at this clip. I want to talk about why she was here, and then we'll talk about the economy as well.
Peace conversation today. Everyone leaving feeling inspired for the present and the future, and the help in finances available. It serves as a testament for the bakery here that you see here. It was wheels down for Vice President Kamala Harris at RU Airport just before noon, greeted by Governor Roy Cooper and Durham Mayor Elaine O'Neill. And minutes later, on stage at the Duke Energy Center for the Performing Arts to talk small business and the Biden-Harris administration's efforts into making investments into community development financial institutions, or CDFIs, what we know as credit unions.
There is so much about this issue that is about making sure that people are seen and heard.
I have family in Mexico City.
The owner of Panaderia Artisanal is one of those people, taking advantage of a loan from Latino Community Credit Union and expanding their bakery from just a truck to a brick and mortar store that the VP visited just after her conversation miles away. The Latino community. So
Val, Vice President Harris was in RTP and in Durham, and she was going around to small businesses because, if you look at the overall economy, and there's a clip I want to play a little bit later about that. But if you look at the overall economy, small businesses still are an integral part of the American economy. Despite COVID, which ruined a lot of businesses, because especially if you're in a restaurant space or any kind of food service or service, cutting hair and all that kinds of. Clearly, it was a struggle to make it through the 3 years of COVID, and we're not over with COVID. We still got to talk about that, in the coming weeks. But small business is integral, and the Biden administration has done a lot of outreach, tried to provide money and stuff for small businesses or whatever. That's one of the better reasons to stick with the Democrats, in my opinion, is that they've always tried to look after stuff like that. Talk to me real quick about the job, and I know this isn't directly related, but the job that they have Vice President Harris doing. She's the person that shows up for events like this. Is she communicating well, one? Two, do you think the message is getting across from the Biden administration that they're actually the ones that have actually done something to help people? Because I didn't see this kind of outreach during the last president, 45.
Yeah, well, I hope so. The history of the vice president has been, they used to call it the person who goes to the funerals and those kinds of things. But the history has been tenuous in terms of making sure that he, and now she, doesn't step on the toes of or get in the way of the sitting president, the most powerful person on the planet right now. So that's first thing. Second thing is political, because we don't know when some vice president may want to challenge his or her boss and run for president as well. So that's very difficult, while at the same time, you're trying to keep your constituents in line by making them feel that you're not overlooking the skills and talents of your vice president, and you're giving them some meaningful things to do, and they are doing well and accomplishing the goals that you set forth and told people that you were going to be about when you ran for office and garnered their votes and became president. So all of that together is fine, but at the same time, Ed, we have to understand that the people who make decisions as to who they're going to vote for based on what's been done or not been done by the sitting administration is very, very small. Most people already know and have made emotional decisions who they're going to support, and they justify what has been done or what has not been done based on the decision that they've already arrived at in terms of who to give their support to. There are some Democratic strategists who think that there's still a bunch of people out there who are going to make a clear decision who to vote for based on what you've done and what promises you've kept. That is fantasy politics. It used to work and it doesn't work anymore. Republicans have understood this long, long ago. Democrats have yet to do that. They're still trying to build a platform that says we did this for you and we did this. I don't care how much you did. The people that marched in Charlottesville with tiki lanterns and stuff will never vote for you. They will never vote for you. People who cheered on Dallin Roof when he went and shot up all of those people in the church. You think they're going to like it because you saved TANF or SNAP? Democrats have got to become real.
Yeah.
And stop trying to change the unchangeable and do the kind of things that they can do.
Well, to your point, here's the president of the United States, Joe Biden.
I have some good news. Before I head to Philadelphia, I wanted to say a few words about what I think is strikingly good news that we just received. Next week, I'll be reporting on the State of the Union. But today I'm happy to report that the State of the Union and the state of our economy is strong. We learned this morning that the economy has created 517,000 jobs just last month, more than 500,000 jobs in just the month of January. In addition, we also learned that there are 500,000 more jobs created last year than we thought. So the January report is updated. The December report is updated. Add that all up, it means we've created 12 million jobs since I took office. That means we have created more jobs in 2 years than any presidential term, than any time in 2 years. That's the strongest 2 years of job growth in history by a long shot. As my dad used to say, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. And 12 million more Americans get up every morning knowing they can provide for their families with the dignity and sense of self-worth that had been missing.
So, Val, Joe gets up there. He says unemployment is low, and it is. Inflation is slowed down, and it did. What's the other thing on my list here? Gas prices are down, and they are, right? I can keep going down my list here.
Yeah.
But why should I? Because there are people who are listening to Marjorie Taylor Greene and those folks who don't give a shit.
Right.
They don't care. They don't care about any of that. Now, I care because that's what I think the president and the administration and all the people throughout government should be doing. But there are people who would have killed grandma in the other party because they didn't want Obamacare. Now, I did that. So I'm going to segue to our last topic, which I want to talk about Omar, Representative Omar being kicked off Foreign Affairs Committee to wrap this up. But these people would have killed grandma had they repealed Obamacare. Guess what the 4 states that have the highest enrollment in Obamacare are, Val? You want to take a guess? Mississippi, Texas,
Right.
Florida, and North Carolina.
Right. All GOP states.
All GOP states who said they wanted to repeal Obamacare. So I'll just leave it at that, and say that I hear Joe Biden. He should talk about what he's done to try to keep things stable. However, we're dealing with irrational people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and to that point, here's Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of Minnesota talking about being kicked off foreign affairs.
This debate today, it's about who gets to be an American. What opinions do we have to be counted as Americans? This is what this debate is about, Madam Speaker. There is this idea that you are a suspect if you are an immigrant, or if you are from certain parts of the world, or a certain skin tone, or a Muslim. It is no accident that members of the Republican Party accused the first Black president, Barack Obama, of being a secret Muslim. It is no accident that former President Donald Trump led a birther movement that falsely claimed he was born in Kenya. Because to them, falsely labeling the first and only President of the United States of America a Muslim and African immigrant somehow made him less American.
Okay, Val. So you're going to tell me Space Laser Lady, who said that the Jews were shooting space lasers at voting to change votes, should be on committees. You're telling me that Santos from New York should be on committees, and even in the House, period. You're telling me Gosart should be on committees. You're telling me people like Jim Jordan, who covered up boys being raped, should be on committees. You're telling me that Matt Gaetz should be on committees, who was having sex with underage girls. And then Representative Omar shouldn't be on a committee because she has some criticisms over American U.S. foreign policy. Tell me real quick why I should even listen to these people. And Representative Omar probably will be back on a committee if the Democrats could regain control, right?
Well, you shouldn't be listening to them at all, simply because they're just playing to their base. They're just playing to their base. Gates wants to get rid of SNAP. Nobody's talking about that yet. And, most people who use SNAP are white people. And most of the people per capita that uses SNAP are not only white people, they're in Mississippi, the poorest state in the nation by far. But the thing about it is Mississippi is also home to the largest percentage of African Americans per capita in that state. They're upwards of 35%. Last time I think it was 38, maybe growing higher percentage of the state's population. These guys don't care. You got to understand the operant piece in their motivational motive operandi. And that is they want to keep the culture like it is here. And if they have to get rid of SNAP, if they can't do with Obamacare anymore, if TANF has to go away, they don't care. As long as they can walk in and do their Walmart swagger and people would look at them and think that they are somehow superior because of the lack of melanin in their skin. That's what they want. And the more we understand that, the closer we're getting to truth.
Well, Val, I'm telling you, they would kill grandma if they could, because grandma's in the way. And I mean that in all sincerity. You know as well as I do that if you get rid of SNAP, by far the people that are going to be hurt the worst are white people. You said it, right? It does, and they're not going to be white people. They're not going to be black people here in the Triangle area that tend to be well off, or in the Beltway area around DC that tend to be well off. It's going to be white people in Louisiana, Mississippi, West Virginia, North Dakota, South Dakota. I've been to Kentucky, Kansas. I've been to all those places, Val. There's some poor white people. And like you said, the only thing they have is that they're not black. They can say that. And that's what Gates and them tell them. No, you don't want to be associated with them. That's why you don't need to learn anything about black history. And they'll start talking about critical race theory and all this other bull. And when they know that kindergartens aren't learning anything about critical race theory, the only reason why people even know the term now is because they keep saying it over and over again. And so here we are, Val. We're in the first week of Black History Month. I encourage people to go and learn something real. Don't wait for somebody to tell you what it is. Buy a damn book. Read a book. There's plenty of books up there. If you're watching, you can see this shelf every week that we're on in Val's house. He's actually read all of those books, people, and more. And I'm sure you read probably upwards 10, 15 books a year, probably from front to back, more than that some years. I do too. And that's what you have to do, people. Do not get the okie doke. So Val, you know what we always do before we end? Tell me something good. Tell me something I need to know. Tell me something you're working on.
Well, right now I'm working on trying to win a championship for my boys. We got a game today at 4:00, and we'll see if they can be successful in spite of the coach. And let's see what goes on. But that's taking all my attention right now, working with these kids. Great bunch of kids. Never had any better. And I'll just see how that works. And then I'll get back to everyday stuff like politics.
Well, I say fire the coach if you lose. I mean, that's usually the best course of action.
Right.
To get rid of the coach, right? No, I do wish you luck, Val, and I know that the kids are getting a tremendous lesson out of the work that you're doing, and you've been doing it a long time. And I applaud you for still doing it. I don't do it anymore. I'm worn out. I love being around the kids and trying to get them to be adults, but it's a lot more work and effort than you think, and you carry it in your heart because you end up being like a parent to some of these kids whose parents may not even show up for the game, and so they're looking to you for all their support. So having a black man in charge, and especially the league where most of the kids are white, I think that's a tremendous statement that you're making there. Well, folks, just a programming note. I'm on Connections on Foxy 107, 104 on Sundays. If you missed it this morning, the audio replay will be available on the Deal website. So we're going to start doing that. So we had a really good guest. She has a company called King's Peppers that's based in Durham. So you want to take a listen to that because we were talking about small business and how to get your small business in a more successful place. And then, of course, go out to the dealwithedclark.com, subscribe, read the pieces that I write. The piece I'm working on for this week is about Black History Month and the importance of it, not just in February, but every month of the year. So catch that this week. We'll be back here next week for another edition of The Deal. So in the meantime, go out and do something good for somebody today. In the meantime, we'll see you later. Bye.